L. Maginnis. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Bob Maginnis, U.S. Army, retired, is an experienced and internationally known expert on national security and foreign affairs. Bob is the vice president for a Maryland-based business that services the U.S. government, and he supervises a team of international specialists at the Pentagon. He is also a broadcast analyst for radio and television. Bob is the author of Deadly Consequences: How Cowards Are Pushing Women into Combat. His new book Never Submit is scheduled for release August-September 2015. Bob graduated from the United States Military Academy, after which he earned his Ranger tab and then was an infantry platoon leader in South Korea. Subsequently, Bob held various positions with 3 infantry divisions on as many continents. He graduated from the Defense Language Institute, Command and General Staff College, Naval Postgraduate School and the Defense Strategy course. He was the Infantry School's Chief for Ethics and Leadership Instruction and an Inspector General at the Pentagon. Before retiring, he served as a member of the Chief of Staff of the Army's study group on homosexuals in the military. Bob subsequently joined the Family Research Council, rising to become Vice President for Policy, while specializing in foreign affairs issues, illicit drug abuse and military readiness. Bob still serves as a senior fellow for FRC. In 2002, Bob joined a contracting firm with duty at the Pentagon specializing on security cooperation. Meanwhile, he was a member of the Secretary of Defense's Retired Military Analyst Group, which took Bob to various war zones and provided significant access to top Bush administration officials. He continues to be seen on numerous international television networks and serves as an analyst for several radio networks. Between 2007 and 2013, Bob wrote a weekly column for Human Events on foreign affairs and national security issues.
So let's have a look at a very interesting book we found in the public domain, public access, written by Robert L. Maginnis, titled Future War, Super Soldiers, Terminators, Cyberspace, and the National Security Strategy for 21st Century Combat. Acknowledgements. He has at the bottom here, I prayed, or he prayed throughout the process of writing this book, asking for God's guidance, and he knew that if this work helps even one person, it is because God gave him the inspiration and wisdom to boldly proclaim the truth. Praise be the Lord. Robert Lee Maginnis, Woodbridge, Virginia, USA. And he dedicates it to American Christian founders who stayed true to their faith in spite of great opposition. May similar men and women be raised up today to bring America back to God through faith in Jesus Christ. Amen. Contents with a foreword and introduction. Foreword. Hope for America is dangling on a thread as we face dual wars from within our culture and an exploding set of assaults from a frightening array of outside enemies. No wonder more Americans than ever believe our once great country is spinning out of control, racing at max speed to prophetic end times. Future War provides a glimpse into our future world with the help of our intelligence community's portrayal of a frightening new reality, full of black swans, unpredictable events, world and domestic megatrends, sobering security threats, and new realities built around a very strange set of emerging global coalitions of state, non-state and other power brokers. Future War exposes what only the sci-fi community would dare to imagine. Cyborgized, super soldiers, cyber threats beyond our wildest imagination, sobering outer space developments, and the most horrendous weapons of mass destruction in the hands of more actors than ever. It demonstrates how each of these sci-fi-like developments plays a role in the coming prophetic end times. Future War concludes with a glimmer of hope for our troubled and lost world. It provides a detailed plan of action to guide America's future, governments and Congress. Those plans have a biblical worldview foundation that tackles 5 of the most daunting macro challenges facing America today. Every concerned American, and especially Christians, must study future war to understand our frightening future, the sobering threats each of us will face, and how especially Bible-believing Christians must get involved in responding to their obligations to engage the world. Romans 13:1-7. Introduction. Spinning out of control. America. Americans sense their world is spinning out of control because hope is dangling on a thread. Physical and economic dangers abound, and our feckless leaders are pushing us at warp speed in the wrong direction, over a cliff. No wonder there is so much talk about the biblical end times. America has been on the edge of the precipice at least 2 other times in its history. Our forefathers faced significant trepidation in 1861 as the nation risked ending the American experiment by launching into a civil war. Secondly, our great-grandparents faced potential national disaster in the mid-1930s through the early 1940s as they simultaneously suffered the devastating effects of the Great Depression and faced global armed threats from the rampaging Imperial Japanese in Asia and the German Nazi campaigns in Eastern Europe. At that time, hope understandably dangled on a very thin thread, and for many, the American spirit was drained almost to empty. Our forefathers were desperate for sound leadership and renewed hope. Eventually, and thankfully, strong leaders did rise to the occasion and American hope was restored, but not without steep costs. President Abraham Lincoln rose to the cry of his countrymen to save the Republic from its worst ever internal threat that took 4 years to resolve and claimed 2% of the population, an estimated 620,000 lives, and simultaneously emptied America's coffers. It's like an offering plate or money. Years later, President Franklin Roosevelt called the coffers like an offering plate, right? We collect the money. You'll see them in churches. It's the old, probably the old Roman Catholic term for an offering plate. Years later, President Franklin Roosevelt rallied the nations to defeat economic disaster as well as the military tyrants of both Europe and Asia. Thankfully, our response to the Second World War pulled America out of the economic pit at a very steep cost of 407,000 lives and $241 billion in 1945, or more than 3.5 million in current dollars. In the present crises really Are the present crises really different than those faced by our forefathers who weathered the Civil War and the Great Depression, Second World War period? Yes, and this is why. Today our enemies are both among us and across the world. We are battling for the very heart of America as well as for our literal survival in an incredibly dangerous new world order. America's cultural war is for the heart of America. At stake is nothing less than the undoing of the results of the American Revolution, which won our liberty from Great Britain's tyranny and our religious freedom. And Dennis Prager, a politically conservative syndicated radio talk show host who moderated a seminar on how to save America at the Conservative Political Action Conference in 2016, The American Revolution ideal of a small and limited government and a great citizenry are being undermined by the left, said Prager. The political right represents what the American Revolution gave us, which Prager defines as the American Trinity: liberty, in God we trust, and Faribus Unum. The left is undermining all three aspects of the American Trinity, and time is short if we have any hope to restore our country. First, the left prefers material equality to liberty. 70% of millennials, those born in early 1980s to the early 2000s, according to Pew Research, do not believe in freedom of speech if the speech will hurt somebody's feelings. Prager explained, after 50 years of left-wing cultural indoctrination, Americans no longer believe in freedom of speech. Rather, the vast majority of Americans today believe in the right not to be offended. The second aspect of the American value system, the Trinity, is in God we trust. This country was founded on the belief that freedom is only possible and small government is only possible if people are accountable to a morally judged God. Prager, a Jew, said the origins of America were God-centered because either God gives us rights or people give us rights, and there is all the difference in the world. The third party of the American Trinity is our national motto, E pluribus unum, which means from many one, or from many becomes one, or they become one. That is being undermined by the left's doctrine of multiculturalism. We are no longer all Americans, a so-called melting pot of humans from all peoples, races, languages, religions and ancestries. No, today we are no longer just Americans, but African Americans, Hispanic Americans, or Native Americans, as Prager interprets the left's new culture. That was not the way the country was founded, but that's what the left has made of contemporary America. That's the battle in a nutshell, Prager said, and that's the cancer now destroying America from within. This is this particular person's own views, not ours. It's bad enough that we face a significant cultural war for America's soul, but our spinning out of control feeling is also attributed to a host of other domestic and international challenges. Economically, the world is riding a roller coaster of confidence with very volatile equity markets such as in China, beginning of what might be the European Union's implosion, massive American federal debt that exceeds 19 trillion, weak currencies and high unemployment and underemployment. Juxtapose these pocketbook uncertainties with a panoply of gut-wrenching challenges, intrusive and corrupt government fueled by misguided and bloated bureaucracies, massive global migration, deadly epidemics like Ebola, genocide among Christians and other minorities in places like the Middle East, almost constant state-on-state conflicts on multiple continents, non-state violent action driven by radical Islamic ideology, creating fear at every level on every continent. The rapidly escalating proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, radiological, nuclear, chemical and biological, in the hands of rogue regimes like Iran, and the terrifying cyber threats to our critical infrastructure that could shut down the electricity in our homes and empty our bank accounts. Compounding American trepidation and a sense that the nation is spinning out of control is the collapse of traditional life. Traditional marriage and family are rarer today than ever before. Children suffer the results of massive fatherlessness. Society judges both preborn and aged lives as totally disposable, if not an unnecessary burden. Meanwhile, the pop culture pushes radical views about relationships like homosexual marriage and defines sex by personal preference, not by one's genitalia. The cultural elite insist our young children must embrace transgender dressing rooms, and radical ideologies are foisted involuntarily on our children in the public schools. American mass media adds to the sense of a lack of control by sensationalizing what years ago were abnormal relationships. but are now the new norm, such as My Two Dads or My Two Mums. Further, American entertainment media is as raunchy as Europe's anything goes programming. The nation's pop music is incredibly misogynistic, filled with vulgarities and virtually every debauchery known to man. As a result, our society has become incredibly coarsened, disgusting, self-absorbed and dehumanized. A 2016 US presidential campaign evidenced a polarized America like never before. Accusatory rhetoric was at an all-time high, and there seemed to be a lack of worthy candidates with relevant and trustworthy leadership experience. The US Congress enjoys the lowest level of the public's confidence in history, and there is shrinking regard for the presidency, according to polls. One can't help but wonder whether the divide can be bridged ever again. High technology contributes to the feeling of a lack of control as well. Our lives are no doubt made easier by high-tech machines, but as a result we have become very hurried and lonely. We are becoming mere insular, almost empty human beings thanks to machines and our frenetic lifestyles. Meanwhile, transhumanism, a value-free and high-tech scientific movement that is embraced by progressives, is going mainstream and harnessing genomic technology, promising to make us smarter, live longer and be physically stronger. And now, thanks to modern science, our comic book superheroes are becoming reality as the Pentagon and our adversaries like China are on the verge of creating super soldiers vis-a-vis the fictional Iron Man. Couple these modern challenges and new age realities with the inevitable, disturbing and seemingly more frequent natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods and fires that create a soreness in the pit of our souls. Thanks to modern media, our every waking hour is filled with moment-by-moment reports of a potpourri of crises, high-tech, social value shifts and political shenanigans that contribute to our anxiety and to the belief that in fact our dizzy world is spinning out of control. That explains in part, and justifiably so, why some people, especially conservative Christians steeped in eschatology, conclude we are rushing headlong into the biblical end times. Is there hope that this spinning will stop and globalized chaos will recede? Yes, but it will take strong visionary leaders and a comprehensive strategy. America once again needs wise leaders who share a hopeful moral vision for our future country. Leaders who are willing to make hard decisions like Lincoln and Roosevelt did in their troubled times. Failing the emergence of strong moral leadership and the formulation of a comprehensive 21st century all-American strategy of hope, this country is doomed to just muddle through and diminish in all the ways it was once great. Or, as many who follow biblical eschatology believe, all these crises might just be building to the end times. Future War addresses the issue of the unhinged America in 3 sections, including a restoration plan for the 21st century America. The first section demonstrates that most citizens perceive the United States is spinning out of control, and a major reason for that widespread view appears to be the nation's cultural implosion, declining liberty, no trust in God, and multiculturalism that is fanned by leadership failure on critical domestic issues as well as overseas, where our security interests are challenged at every turn. This section anticipates the United States' future will get much worse than it is today, which leads us to examine the characteristics and influences of our future alarming world global megatrends, potential game changers that might influence those trends, the impact of the inevitable catastrophic events, black swans, i.e. unexpected events, etc., and likely alternative worlds that may emerge from the anticipated chaos. The first section concludes by identifying specific challenges that must be immediately resolved. Then we examine the type of leader best prepared to tackle those challenges in a spinning out of control America. Section 2 acknowledges that the foundation of our spinning out of control condition is a fragmenting of our institutions and our morality, which explains why many biblical worldview Christians believe we are rushing towards the prophetic end times. Keeps repeating that. Then we anticipate the logical progression of this future chaotic state to examine a dangerous mix of frightening actors and emerging sci-fi like technologies that create a sobering mixture of global threats to our collective security. A new non-polar geopolitical security environment, a morphing, increasingly dangerous global terrorist threat, a transhumanist technological revolution that threatens to remake man into Frankenstein-like monsters, including a terrifying cyborg warrior, class 4 robotic-like war-making, the reality of weaponizing outer space, the cyber threat to control every aspect of our lives, and the growing near-term threat of catastrophic attacks by any number of ideologically charged enemies armed with incredibly cruel weapons of mass destruction. Each of these threats appears linked, albeit subtly, to specific prophetic signs of the end times that are explored at the conclusion of each of the sections of the Section 2 chapters. Section 3 is about America's future strategic plans to address the new realities, given the aforementioned megatrends and the emerging threats. The collision of these sobering, volatile ingredients makes us wonder whether the biblical end times are imminent. However, we offer a detailed strategic plan for America should the Lord tarry, which frankly can't be too far into the future unless we soon experience a global miracle of peace. This section assumes Christians will participate in their government as never before and do so with a fully engaged biblical worldview and an eye for prophecy, believing the time is short. It examines what a biblical worldview means and how that view is carried out in terms of biblical values and principles within every part of our government and culture. Then those values and principles are put into action through a comprehensive Christian vision for America with very specific strategies for 5 major challenge areas: national security, national intelligence, foreign affairs, economy and culture. Section 3's chapter begins with a profile of the nation's security strategies by outlining a 6-part approach to revamping the Pentagon's critical task of protecting America, albeit the time from a biblical worldview perspective. Similarly, it then examines the nation's national intelligence community, which is hard to understand, mostly because it is so secretive. However, the need for secrecy doesn't give it license to run roughshod over American civil liberties. And yes, we have every right to expect it to operate within the law while gathering the intelligence needed to keep us safe. Our wayward foreign policy establishment is the next topic, and we begin with an explanation as to how it works or doesn't, and things that drive our foreign policy decisions. Then we suggest why our dealings with other nations seem so dysfunctional. That chapter advances on American foreign policy from a biblical worldview that addresses tough topics like immigration and Christian genocide in the Middle East. Pocketbook issues have every American's interest today, especially in light of the nation's near economic collapse in 2008, followed by the tepid recovery under President Obama. Changes. Chapter 1 to 4 examines a biblical view of economics and then applies that perspective to a plan to return our free enterprise system to a healthy state. That begins with protecting the foundation of family and family unit, and outlines a plan to reduce our colossal deficit and our out-of-control government spending. Finally, we examine our Beavis and Butthead, a crass adult animated sitcom culture that is spiraling into the slimy pit of immorality, and then we explore a 5-part vision and plan to restore our culture to a moral place until the Lord's return. Throughout Future Wars, this particular book, we keep returning to the scriptures for insights about the future. In Matthew 8:28, in the New King James Version, the Bible relates a story of Jesus' confrontation with 2 demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, indicated by the same Hebrew words, and these 2 uses are the only ones in the Bible. Reconciling these 2 English versions of the same word, it is an easy shift to a single translation: raging insanity. In short, God is describing a world of chaos and evil as we approach the end times, a world spinning out of control, fueled by raging insanity. That's where we are today. Future War is a sobering call to action for Christian Americans who must take off their blinders, remove the scales from your eyes, and engage our government and perhaps the last chance we have to salvage our once great nation. We must do so with a clear biblical worldview powered by Christian values and principles, and even then it may just be too late given the avalanche of signs that are crashing at an accelerating speed toward the prophetic end times. Section 1, our current lost state of affairs. Chapter 1, spinning out of control in wrong direction. In October 2014, President Barack Obama spoke to a fundraising event at the White Street restaurant in New York City. He assured fellow Democrats there's a sense possibly that the world is spinning so fast and nobody is able to control it. Obama guaranteed his supporters that he has things under control. The president promised the New York City audience of his steady hand on world affairs. On every single issue of importance, when there are challenges and there are opportunities around the world, it's not Moscow they call, it's not Beijing they call us. Mr. Obama said, the president's pledge aside, most Americans believe the world is in fact spinning out of control, and Mr. Obama shares some of that responsibility for the widely held view that America is on the wrong path. Why do Americans perceive that our country is on the wrong path? To a large extent, it's because there is an absence of American strategic leadership in spite of Mr. Obama's lofty rhetoric about his foreign policy successes. In fact, his foreign policies coupled with his domestic successes, liberal social policies, high corporate taxes, Obamacare, politicized federal bureaucracy like the Internal Revenue Service, and whittling away at our Second Amendment rights are major factors contributing to widespread angst among Americans. It causes worry, fear, etc. As bad as Mr. Obama's foreign and domestic policies may be, he is only the latest contributor to the modern chaos that most Americans sense. Widespread spinning and wrong direction perception. Americans consistently over the past couple of decades have told pollsters by large majorities that the world is spinning out of control, or in other words, everything seems to be heading in the wrong direction. Recently, for example, 6 national surveys taken between February 11th and March 20, 2016 found that an average of 64.8% of Americans believe that the country is heading in the wrong direction. Such widespread expression of wrong direction is relatively long in the South. Pollsters started asking about the level of American dissatisfaction with the country's direction in the early 1990s. The New York Times found, for example, in 2002 that 35% of Americans believe things have pretty seriously gotten on the wrong track. And there's more information on that. Different people and surveys. Arguably, we could lay the blame for the national wrong way perceptions at the feet of modern media, cable, broadcast, internet, and social, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, social media. These modes of delivering information dump large doses of distressing personal, international, and domestic news on our collective laps at rapid fire 24/7 with no let up, ushering into our daily existence giant doses of insomnia. Blaming the media for all the out of control stress is wrong, though reporting and the 24/7 technologies that derive information into our brains are not responsible. They are not responsible for the earthquakes, wars, and genocides. After all, public media provides a service, albeit sometimes biased, that we have the option to switch off. Few of us do in fact turn it off because it's so addictive. Our appetite for news, whether about our friends, families, or foreign wars, seems insatiable. But there is a deeper issue that forms the background for much of the bad news that we consume every day that contributes to the present sense of being out of control. The spinning started with Soviet's downfall. The seemingly out of control rush of bad news can be blamed in part on the unraveling of international order, which began with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. But just as important as the collapse of the Soviet Union was the American failure to seize that opportunity to set the world on a better course. Ultimately, it was America's leadership failure that significantly contributed to present-day chaos. The former Soviet Union was a definable enemy during the nearly 5-decade-long Cold War that gave the West an evil empire upon which to focus all its energy. Now, decades after the end of the Cold War, Americans find they no longer face one giant evil threat, but numerous lesser enemies and associated crises. To our collective worry, the result of replacing that giant enemy with a potpourri of lesser evils is a much more unstable world that feeds our fears, that drive perceptions. The world is in fact spinning out of control. The proliferation of numerous enemies was preventable, but over the ensuing decades, American leaders lacked the insight and wisdom to take advantage of the notwithstanding brief unipolar world they inherited once the Soviet Union crumbled. Rather than act responsibly and with vision, American leaders failed to seize the moment and so grasp the opportunity. Very interesting information. Very, very interesting information. It's quite well detailed. And it says not all the president's fault. It's easy to lay blame for today's insecurity on President Obama and Democrats, or today Donald Trump. Okay, so there's great detail there about the Cold War, post-Cold War. In conclusion, Chapter 2, Future Trends in an Out of Control World. And this chapter anticipates the characteristics and influences of our future worldwide with the help of forward-thinking efforts such as the analysis published by the National Intelligence Council, NIC, the Global Trends 2030, Alternative World. The NIC states we're at a critical juncture in human history which could lead to widely contracting futures. It is our contention that the future is now set in stone. That it's not set in stone, but is malleable. Specifically, the NIC considers current global megatrends potential game changers that might alert or influence those trends, some potential future black swans, unexpected events, and suggests alternative worlds that might emerge from these ingredients. This chapter concludes with a suggestion that the forecasted outcomes by the NIC and others represent some, perhaps not all, of the prophetic signs of the end times. Global and domestic trends, individual empowerment, diffusion of power, demographic patterns. Anticipated shifts between now and 2030. There's some depth about that. The eighth shift, non-traditional spiritual lives, potential game changers that might alter or influence the trends. Potential future black swans or unexpected events. Severe pandemics, European Union collapse, democratic or collapsed China, a reformed Iran, nuclear war or weapons of mass destruction, cyber attack, solar geomagnetic storms, and US disengagement. A collapse or sudden retreat of US power probably would result in an extended period of global anarchy. No leading power would be likely to replace the United States as guarantor of the international order. Certainly the missing black swan, respective events, is the return of Jesus Christ, which many Bible-believing Christians anticipate could happen soon, given the many prophetic signs evident today. That event will ultimately make all the trends, game changers, and the above unexpected events totally irrelevant. However, in the meantime, we must deal with the potential unpredictable catastrophic events identified above and the challenges they present to our rapidly changing chaotic world. And it goes on about alternative worlds that might emerge from these ingredients. Moral decline in humanism erupts. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. 2 Timothy 3:1-4, New King James Version. This sign is undeniable, given the news that spews from every media source. Mankind is consumed with personal betterment and abandons everything for materialism. Hedonism is his God, and so forth. war is more frequent, and ye shall hear of wars, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Matthew 24:6, KJV. Increased Christian persecution. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake, and then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. Matthew 24:9-10, King James Version. Technology controls man, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark of that, with the name of that beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13:17, King James Version. There could be a possible future where a new world order system controls everyone and everything. But this verse in particular, in the Galilean Aramaic, translated to the nearest English, into the nearest English equivalent, hints that it already happened with a certain Caesar in Rome during the 3.5-year ministry of Christ. This person was blasphemous, had abominations, just talked a whole lot of nonsense, and declared that he was a god, that he was of the gods, descended of gods, and these images were created, i.e. statues or busts of this particular emperor, where everybody had to bow down to it, and you couldn't buy or trade or anything like that, and even if you did, you were heavily taxed by these Romans, beyond the joke, right? It made it so hard for normal people to survive. Yeah, so all this already happened. Yeah, and then arose a false prophet or a false leader of a certain false Christian-like but pagan mixed church. Okay, who then went across country, invaded others, and forced them to submit to their false prophet, their leader, and their false church. So these people end up with nothing, so they had to grovel, and they were told, you become a citizen and behave and all this sort of stuff, and they were given a certificate to verify or commission, etc., that they are loyal to this particular false prophet, this church, and this empire, this powerful empire that nobody at the time could defeat. It was just too powerful military-wise. Go across lands for 2.5 years and invade others, put them to the sword, take all they have. Yeah, there's many that entered into the Roman Empire and became part of that empire as citizens, but they were given a certain seal, certification, commission to verify that they were actual citizens, honouring the Caesar, that church, false church, etc. It's all in the book of Revelation. We've already covered that. But yeah, they'd probably be able to control you similar, the whole system, right, a world empire, through these technologies. You know, whatever these conspiracy theorists claim could become fact, like chips in your brain. You can't do this, you can't do that unless you have it. You can't buy, sell, or anything like that. But really, the mark described there is a spiritual sign, commission, etc., that reveals that you are. You have God's mark. Okay, from afar, He can identify who is His. So you are His, right? You can tell you are His or of the Christ from afar. Or the counterfeit, the opposite. Okay? You have that commission, that seal, etc. You're loyal to the counterfeit, to the false prophet, to the false religion. Okay? And this world power, this empire, which everybody grovels to for all that, all trade and all that sort of stuff, and they shared in her iniquities over the centuries, putting the saints or those who believed in Christ to death through their inquisitions and so forth. Okay, bring world back from the cliff or end times. That's a good chapter. Major problems facing America that need fixing. It drops hints there. And it talks about Obama and his statements and his screw-ups like Obamacare and so forth. So we hope that you enjoyed this video that we brought you insight into why America is going downhill according to this expert, and you may realise that yourself, and he has these many suggestions how to fix America to stop it from going into the end times or becoming a total hellhole, etc., etc. He has here this conclusion of this chapter. The 21st century problems outlined exist in a rapidly changing and troubled world, which demands leaders with our founders' type of moral vision and a host of time-proven character traits to guide America to renewed greatness or usher it into the prophesied end times. The old Trump quote, "Make America great again." Is he actually doing that? Or is it just a yap, you know? America needs men like William Wilberforce, an English politician and Christian champion of the movement to abolish the slave trade. Thanks to Wilberforce's tenacity to overcome many obstacles, his campaign led to the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which abrogated slavery in most of the British Empire. We need that Wilberforce-like dogged determination in our champions facing the challenge in the 21st century. You need someone similar to that. New World Order threats and risks. He actually says there is a New World Order. Okay. Non-polar New World Order. Return of the multipolar world. Terrorist threats and risks. What is terrorism? It can be easily defined as a crime meant to terrorise, such as the kind that makes us afraid to send our kids to school after mass shootings in places like Columbine, Colorado or Sandy Hook, Connecticut, or to join a foot race in a major city after the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, a 2015 Christmas party in San Bernardino, California, or to fly home from Brussels, Belgium airport in 2016, and so forth. And goes on about terrorist organisations and their motivation. Goes on about Islam and Muslims, terrorism's future, and terrorism's prophetic sign, and then it talks about transhumanism and super soldiers, Future will be like today's science fiction movies and video games, technologically enhanced, part automation, super soldiers, stronger, smarter, faster, and with a dulled conscience that allows them to viciously kill or on command. Will fight as individuals in highly coordinated, wired-in teams. They will fight anywhere, anytime, night or day, employing incredibly advanced, effective standoff weapons using data transmitted directly to their brains from multiple sources. Drones, satellites, and fellow super soldiers. They will excel in urban fighting, the constant battle necessary to defeat terrorists and other super soldier enemies. They will be hailed as the ultimate soldiers, the dream of generations of generals and small boys. In the end, they will be nightmares. This chapter 6, introduces the subject of transhumanism, which seeks to combine the best of man and machines, and a concept embraced by the Pentagon science arm in order to field the 21st century's super soldier. However, the creation of cyborgized soldiers, beings of both organic and biomechatronic body parts, raises very serious ethical and moral issues, as well as provides good reason to believe that these super soldiers are yet another sign of the end times. Yeah, what if they start thinking for themselves and they just go all out, just start wiping out everything, right? Everybody. Because they have no conscience. It goes into transhumanism and so forth. And then into the Soviet Union and the mind-controlling drugs, poisons, etc. MK Ultra. And Pentagon Super Soldier Crusade. DARPA's work to improve the soldiers' fighting capabilities fits the transhumanist agenda and warrants special attention given the aforementioned abuses, as well as the contemporary legal and ethical implications of using so-called soldier enhancements to prepare them for the 21st century battlefield, and so forth. It's a really interesting book. We recommend it. If you like what we've presented to you so far, then subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Read the book and then come back and tell us what you think. Give us your opinion. We'd really like that. It'd be really interesting to find out what Americans, etc., think of all of this and this particular person, Robert L. Maginnis, and what he's stating here as fact. Yeah, so subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments down below, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can. And then go share this particular video with all your family, friends, church friends, other Christians, etc., that this is possibly what the future is going to become, or what the president is going to lead up to, instigating end times, the prophetic end times. This could be it.
Robert L. Maginnis. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Bob Maginnis, U.S. Army, retired, is an experienced and internationally known expert on national security and foreign affairs. Bob is the vice president for a Maryland-based business that services the U.S. government, and he supervises a team of international specialists at the Pentagon. He is also a broadcast analyst for radio and television. Bob is the author of Deadly Consequences: How Cowards Are Pushing Women into Combat. His new book, Never Submit, is scheduled for release August-September 2015. Bob graduated from the United States Military Academy, after which he earned his Ranger tab and then was an infantry platoon leader in South Korea. Subsequently, Bob held various positions with 3 infantry divisions on as many continents. He graduated from the Defense Language Institute, Command and General Staff College, Naval Postgraduate School and the Defense Strategy course. He was the infantry school's chief for ethics and leadership instruction and an inspector general at the Pentagon. Before retiring, he served as a member of the Chief of Staff of the Army's study group on homosexuals in the military. Bob subsequently joined the Family Research Council, rising to become Vice President for Policy, while specializing in foreign affairs issues, illicit drug abuse and military readiness. Bob still serves as a senior fellow for FRC. In 2002, Bob joined a contracting firm with duty at the Pentagon specializing on security cooperation. Meanwhile, he was a member of the Secretary of Defense's Retired Military Analyst Group, which took Bob to various war zones and provided significant access to top Bush administration officials. He continues to be seen on numerous international television networks and serves as an analyst for several radio networks. Between 2007 and 2013, Bob wrote a weekly column for Human Events on foreign affairs and national security issues.
So let's have a look at a very interesting book we found in the public domain, public access, written by Robert L. Maginnis, titled Future War, Super Soldiers